The jungle was never silent. It hissed, clicked, whispered, and groaned with life that never slept. But on that morning in the summer of 1943, deep inside the South Pacific, the jungle was unnaturally still. Even the birds that usually screamed from the treetops were quiet. The air felt heavy, thick enough to swallow sound, thick enough to crush a man's breath. That was the moment 25 American soldiers realized something terrible was moving toward them. They stood on a narrow ridge coated with mud and loose stones, the kind that slid under your boots if you stood still too long. Below them, the jungle valley stretched wide and dark, an ocean of green shadows. And through those shadows, they watched distant figures advancing first, like insects, then like ghosts, then unmistakably like soldiers. Not a patrol, not a scouting party, but an entire Japanese force, nearly 2,500 strong. The men had not come expecting a fight. Their orders had been simple: scout the ridge, confirm enemy movement, report back. That was it. But the ridge they had climbed revealed a truth far beyond their orders. The Japanese were moving fast, too fast, and the direction of their advance made one thing very clear. This valley was their path to reinforcing artillery, supply routes, and future offensives. If they broke through, the American line behind this jungle would collapse. And now the only men in their way were a group of 25 scouts who barely had enough ammunition to survive a single skirmish, let alone a full-scale assault. They could have run, they could have slipped back into the vines and the darkness. No one would have blamed them, but they didn't move. They didn't retreat. They didn't abandon the ridge. Instead, they watched their Lieutenant Marcus Hale step forward through the silence. Hale was not a large man, nor the kind who intimidated with sheer presence. He had calm eyes, a scar on the bridge of his nose, and a voice that rarely rose above a steady tone. He wasn't a hero in stories. He wasn't a legend in any book. He was simply the man these soldiers trusted more than the ground beneath their feet. He studied the valley for a long, breathless moment. No binoculars, no map, no compass, just instinct honed by 2 brutal years of war. The men waited for him to say the order they expected: fall back, regroup, warn command. But instead, he turned to them and spoke the most impossible words they had ever heard. We hold the ridge. For a moment, the men thought they had misheard him. Hold the ridge. With 25 men, against an approaching force so large it looked like a black wave sliding through the jungle. Hale saw their hesitation and repeated himself. We hold right here, right now. He didn't explain, not yet. He didn't need to. Something in his voice, calm, steady, absolutely certain, cut through the rising dread inside them. Men who had been ready to run suddenly found themselves gripping their rifles as if their lives had already been decided. Only then did Hale kneel, scoop dirt in his hand, and let it fall through his fingers. The soil scattered in the wind and drifted over the edge of the ridge. When he spoke again, his words felt like prophecy. If the Japanese take this valley, the division behind us dies. If the division dies, this island falls. And if this island falls, the entire Pacific line shifts. He looked each man in the eye before finishing quietly. This ridge is not a hill. It's the hinge of the whole war. There was no speech after that. No dramatic commands. No declarations of glory or sacrifice. The men simply began to dig because they understood. They dug because someone had to hold the line. And they trusted the man who had told them it had to be them. The ground shook faintly every few minutes. The vibrations moved through the soil as the Japanese force grew closer. The earth itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of marching feet and shifting gear. The sound of metal brushing against wood echoed like distant thunder. Still, the Americans worked. They carved firing positions into the ridge. They reinforced natural cover. They rationed ammunition as if every bullet was a line between life and death. By mid-afternoon, the jungle no longer hid the Japanese movement. Now the valley churned with thousands of soldiers advancing in tight formation, disciplined, silent, deadly. Their banners fluttered between the trees, their boots crushed leaves in synchronized rhythm, a single battalion moving as one living creature. The Americans watched in grim silence, 25 men against an army. But then something unexpected happened. Hale stood, slung his rifle across his back, and walked to the very edge of the ridge. His men called after him, thinking he'd lost his mind. But he simply knelt again, feeling the earth beneath him, studying the lines of the land, reading the terrain like a general reading a map. The ridge narrowed behind them into a bottleneck, the jungle walls rising steep and uneven. The slope below created a funnel that forced anyone approaching to come straight into their line of fire. And beyond that, the thick foliage masked how few Americans there really were. That was the moment Hale's men understood. He wasn't planning suicide. He wasn't planning surrender. He was planning to trap the Japanese in the one place where numbers meant nothing. He was planning to let the enemy surround them, because only then could he unleash the one advantage they had left. The Japanese did not know the ridge, but Hale did. He had studied the land like a man reading the future. And the future, he believed, was a battlefield only the Americans could win. As night crept in, the jungle came back to life with a quiet, eerie hum. But beneath that sound beat the heart of something far more terrifying. The slow, unstoppable approach of an army moving toward 25 men who had no intention of running. They were alone. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. And yet, For the first time since the war began, the Americans felt calm because they realized something powerful and undeniable. They weren't trapped with the Japanese. The Japanese were walking into a trap set by them, and when the first shadow moved at the bottom of the ridge, when the first pair of eyes appeared through the leaves, when the first whisper of enemy boots reached their ears, the real battle began.